So today I'm going to discuss about chapter 7. This tutorial will cover uh, chapter 7 of the book Nanobrain, the making of an artificial brain made of a time crystal. And in this book, um, we have tried to create a new way of investigating brain and scientific exploration as well. Uh, the reason is that, as I said, that in the current Turing-based philosophy and existing way of doing science, what we do is we consider that the events that are happening in the universe, uh, whatever be its complexity, we can rewrite those events on a string with simple identical events, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. So two kinds of events that are identical events can rewrite every single complex events. But here in this book, in chapter 2, we have seen that we have said that events are vertical, so it's not horizontal, step by step. It's a vertical, and it's geometric. So we have, say, cube, dodecahedron, octahedron, this kind of geometric shapes. So on the corner of the geometric shape, events are located, and those events have much more complex geometric shapes inside that. So event inside an event inside an event. So within and above, all these events grow. Therefore, you cannot rewrite every single event of the universe the way it is happening there. So instead of single thread of Turing tape, we have a fractal tape where using geometric shapes you go inside and inside and inside. So there could be many unique different kind of geometric shapes, but we have classified 15 of them. Instead of 0, 1, there are 15 geometric shapes, which uh, primarily we use to convert every other information. In chapter 3, we saw that instead of a single thread, we have to create a phase prime metric where events, symmetry of the events represented in terms of prime numbers or ratio of primes is re-architectured in the form of a temple shape, and that is there. Now in chapter 4 we saw that in this scenario you need a completely different kind of mechanics, because one inside another inside another inside another, you cannot write differential equation. So you need a tensor or different kind of geometric algebra. So we introduced Dodecanian algebra, which never existed. Now, in chapter 5, we talked about why this computing is extremely good, superior, and what are its weaknesses. And then in chapter 6, we traversed 15 years of our research. What are the key research findings or discoveries that have led us to this book or new kind of brain model? But chapter 7 is one of the most important aspect of artificial brain reverse engineering. The reason is that if you want to build a brain, how that brain would be. So this chapter has 21 figures, and 21 figures have 8 to 10 panels. So there are at least 150 panels or 150 figures. And in 1 hour, I will cover basic things. So if you have the book, open the book and then go figure by figure. And then when I will finish my conversation with you, I would not say conversation, I would say lecture, because I'm not listening to you. But I will finish my lecture, then I would be you would be able to get basic ideas how the figures are built. So let us come to figure 7.1, the first figure of chapter 7. And here you see that figures 7.1a, you have two wheels. Okay, two wheels. In one you have 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 37, 47, something like that, primes. And then there is an arrow, and you see another wheel, 2, 3, 5, 4, 2, 3, 5, 7, all the primes. So primes, if we see the statistical, it is this wheel, this circular shape is actually the base of the temple architecture that you saw in chapter 3. So basically this particular base is the truth. So if you see C2 symmetry, you will find 50%. So that's why half of this circle is green in figure 7.1a. So, so that is the reality. But when you want to reverse engineer a conscious machine or a machine, you would like to get detailed, intricate, um, um, intricate explanation of every single symmetries that is contributing to the to the visible universe or sensible universe to us. What does it mean? Because 2 covers 50%, 3 covers 16%. If you just cover 3 or 4 primes, you will almost reach 70-80%. So of all possible symmetries of the universe. But that is not the truth. When you try to get geometric shapes, you need major compositions of geometric shapes. For an example, icosahedron. You need it. In the Platonic geometry, it comes there. It doesn't mean, though Plato said that only 20 geometries are enough. Actually not. There could be more, but more and more complexity would be there. Less will be its statistical probability of regulating the events in nature, because as we said in chapter 3, that you don't try to, when you suppose you are nature, you have 12 or 15 primes. When you reach saturation with the 10 to the power 11 number of oscillators, you would like to convert it into 1 and then start recounting. Similarly, topologically, when you try to create, a similar thing happens. I repeat, when you take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 up to 10 to the power 11, or product of 15 primes or 12 primes, when you reach there up to 10 to the power 11, 10 to the power 12, or this number, there is no exact limit. When you reach to that number, it's not favorable to go and increase or take more and more primes, because contribution becomes very, 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 very less. It's true, but at the same time, topologically, you have to consider that when you take a cube, when you take an octahedron, when you take a dodecahedron, or take icosahedron, they are not everything. They are truncated icosahedron that looks like a football, or truncated dodecahedron. So many similar kind of structures are there which play a very vital role. So please do not consider Platonic geometry as absolute, but beyond certain structures, like after 20 or 30 or 40 planes, after 48 different kind of planar structures, you will find that triangular shaped pyramidal octahedron like structures, or those kind of features, are repeating and repeating and repeating. You are not adding new new dimensions to the structures. You feel self-similar structures are coming and coming and coming. In that sense, if you want to resolve those geometric shapes, because events are geometric shapes, if you want to do that in nature, then you have to build a machine by doing engineering, so that those primes are very well incorporated. Now suppose you are the god, and somebody asks you that you have to build the brain. So what did you do? You take number of components. Very simple, very simple. Our brain model is based on just one single sentence. You have seen the phase prime metric. You have seen that there are primes, and then primes create many different choices, 2 into 3, 3 into 2, the way 6 events could be rearranged. So you have seen that one. Now, if somebody asks you to build 6, so you take a 2 and then you group 3 into it, and then, or 3 to group into it. So what happens is that this kind of grouping and then vibrations, how can you build oscillators or cavities together? So this brain model is about putting the cavities or resonators. Cavity means flute. Flute is a cavity resonator. The dielectric resonator. Dielectric resonator is like a tuning fork. It's a solid metal bar. You hit it and some vibration. So these two kind of resonators are there, which brain uses, and then it puts prime number of components side by side. So this first part of all the figures, figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, figure 4, figure 5, figure 6, all these first 6 figures are actually telling you that look, if you go deeply and look at the cavities and resonators in the brain, you will find that brain is actually creating prime number of cavities, bigger cavities in a particular shape, and it is putting prime number of cavities inside, and then prime number of cavities inside, and then prime number of cavities inside, and then this is how with few primes it is creating a network. So we have found there are 12 layers, cavity inside a 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 cavity. The 12 layers of cavity structures are there by which the brain has been engineered. So it is, you may say that we are biased, but when we will present it to you, you will realize that there maybe we are not that biased. Of course, since we have discovered these primes while observing the vibrations and signal transmission in the brain component, we will be biased. So first part of this chapter, first 6 figures will be about only giving you examples that look at this cavity in the brain, it looks like a prime. You look at that cavity like a prime. Then what we would do is we would take those cavities and rebuild those in computer simulator. So we really did it. Every single component, painstakingly we did it. And then we simulated the resonance behaviors, resonance frequencies, and we found what are the relationship of different frequencies and their phase relationship. And after that we will be presenting you the model, how those things are integrated, how different components are integrated. Are there something, some engineering, hidden engineering beyond what we look into it, just vibrations and phase prime metric? Is there something beyond? And then we will get into how conscious experiences are emerging from this kind of systems, this kind of nested time crystal architectures. Now you know universal time crystal that we have presented in chapter 2, that you have a clock, and then when in the clock a system point is moving, there is a phase singularity. Phase singularity means clock is undefined, you don't know what is the time over there, you get totally confused. And then I have also told you that if there are 3 confusions on a clock, then it's a triangle. That's how you encode information. Similarly, in the brain, cavity inside a cavity inside a cavity, and then when you have a big cavity, there could be many cavities inside. So and then inside that there will be many cavities. So in this way, when you organize it, actually you create clock architectures like universal time crystal. That was the last figure of chapter 6, last chapter. In neuron we built it. So I explained it for neuron in much more details, because here in this chapter you find no discussion about it. So if you want to understand it, you have to go chapter 6 and last figure, and you can look at listen to that video also. So then we will come to time crystal presentation, and finally the conscious experiences, how those time crystals will be created. So there is a beautiful thing. One part is hardware, another part is software. So hardware is engineered so that prime number of components are there, so that fetch prime metric hardware is created. And then that fetch prime metric hardware is so engineered that it creates this kind of time crystal thing. If they vibrate and oscillate in the time domain, this kind of vibrations are created. Here is a big difference from any other brain model of the world. And what is that? That is, in all other models, we try to find in the brain or any biological system some relevance to the already invented system. For an example, brain, we try to find out, okay, computer has a logic circuit or something like that. There must be something. Other things can never happen. This kind of blind faith have colluded us. And then we always try, all the paper, thousands and thousands of papers are published. everything try to correlate. They take this phenomenon, they take quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics came from a completely different direction, but we impose that on the brain. Classical mechanics, string theory, multi-dimensional thing, and then all these things. But one thing never challenged. That is always like circuits. Non-circuital way. I can I can I can realize incredible properties without building circuits. That proposal never came, and nobody believes in it. But this model here, that the one that we present, we don't need wiring, because vibrations uh, create phase space, and then they interact, and then they overlap, and the junction point, they create number of singularity points when they overlap in those phase spheres, and that's how it goes on and on and on. Then you may say that, okay, then how one part of the device, then I see the electric signal is passing through in the brain. How that happens? That is in one time domain, in a millisecond time domain. We need to run a clock, so that clock actually runs by electrical signal. So that time domain actually comes from there. So you will find, if you look at electromagnetic transmission, then you will find in some time domain that is working. There could be solitary transmissions. So all these things is also explained, summarized here. So this chapter is basically 21 figures are there, but it's a summary. So now we come to figure 7.1b. 7.1b shows C2 symmetry, C2 symmetry, C3 symmetry. If we say the structure we see, then we will find that 1 to 47 or 37 or 31, these primes are dominating in this symmetric structure, and the other symmetric structure, this number of primes are the symmetric structure, that number of primes. So C2, C3, C5, C7 up to up to C40, 41 and C43, C47. So all these symmetries are there, and see how to see the symmetry is explained in figure 7.1b. Now come to figure 7.1c in the real brain. In the real brain, you can see that how would like to see C3 symmetry. So 3 different parts of the brain. And then in the midbrain, if you go, you will find again 3 symmetries. So triplet of triplet. And if you look at the fornix, over the midbrain, there is a antenna-like structure from which there is just bottom is corpus callosum, from where nerve fibers are going from both sides of the brain, left and right brain. And that one is called, there is a singular gyrus that is very much, it's like antenna projecting some signal all over the brain and then coming back. No, don't think that I'm provocating, I'm promoting that electromagnetic antenna-like things are happening. If I promote that, that will be one particular view. Very soon, I will show you that 12 different kind of transmission mechanisms are there and would be there for the survival of our brain model. We need 12 different kind of carriers, 12 different kind of completely different physical mechanism to create 12 nested universes, one inside another. Only then Dodecanian algebra will come in, and only then we can create time crystals in many wide ranges of time domain, and imaginary interactions would be there from between different universes, right? So that's why I can never endorse only one kind of mechanism, like electromagnetic resonance brain. That kind of models exist. Ionic brain model that everybody believes, and then circuit brain model that logic gate is there and something like that, and then dipolar model is there, solitonic brain model is there. So people have made models with one mechanism only, and these are the some group of scientists advocate this is a mechanism, this is the mechanism, this is the mechanism. Just like in Upanishad, in the Hindu scriptures, they say how people see elephants. So they say some people are looking at the leg, some people looking at the trunk, and some people looking at that. There is no point in debate. There is an elephant, and perhaps this elephant is here in this chapter, in the whole elephant. So where you can find that every single transmission mechanisms, and then the memory storage methodologies are incorporated in a very integrated manner. So figure 7.1 A, the bottom part, you will find connectome. Connectome is extremely popular. That is a nerve fiber map, and people think everything is over there. Then how could dinosaur become conscious? Or are conscious or not, some people would fight, leave them apart. But when you look at the structures, there are many popular videos. You can just go to YouTube and you can enjoy. You will find that it's not us, but when other researchers have classified based on the symmetry of the connectome, they have made it five-fold symmetries, and they have put five colors. We have not done it. So many of the things that you would see here, you can get back to the literature, because thousands of literatures we surveyed on brain research, and then what other researchers pointed out that in this many folds of symmetries are there, then we just took that. For an example, C5 symmetry, where you can find that Wigert and plus Golgi stain, you'll find 7 layers in cortical column. 7 is a prime. And then you will find in the spinal cord, there is a slice. There's a threefold symmetry, left, right, this kind of two anchors, and then one vertical through the spinal cord. It goes, so if you just take a cavity, make this a structure, and then you pump energy after artificially creating it, then you will be able to see that energy is localized in 3 different domains. From that simulation, we concluded that it will be C3 symmetry. So every single brain component we have taken, we have recreated it in computer simulator, and then we pumped energy, electromagnetic energy, and then we try to see where the energy is localized. Now you may say that why do you take one kind of energy, electromagnetic energy, and do it? Because Maxwell's equations, it is easiest way to understand the dielectric properties, because it's an insulator. So so there is no way that current can conduct, but localization of energy is easy to do it. But if anybody is interested, they can do it with sound, but they can do it with other waveform also, and you will read similar kind of conclusions that that we have done. So you can, it's an open suggestion. You can check it out. Figure 7.1D. This is the key part of our brain model. So in our brain model have a sensor section. Then in the midbrain, where signals come from sensor and sent to the higher level, and then there is a hierarchical level from which the signals come after processing and then goes back to the sensor. So there is a complete network like system. And then figure 7.1E, this is very interesting because because we try to create a manifold. Manifold means when you are taking data from sensor, of course you are taking 11-dimensional different dynamics. 11-dimensional dynamics. Why 11-dimensional dynamics? Because we operate our brain using phase, space, time, topology, prime metric, as we have explained many times earlier in chapter 4. And so if you have this kind of new type of metric, now paper is published, you can contact me to get the paper, or I will give the link here in the brain model, where we have given detailed of this mathematical description. I don't want to overload you with this this kind of mathematics, but we created a metric. So metric is space that you see and that changes, and then sometimes later you start seeing in the time domain what are happening, and after some higher level of dynamics, you start seeing it in terms of primes, and then elementary transition of one prime to another, or topology is changing from one to another. But after that, it becomes purely mathematical. So density of primes and other things are changing. So when topological transitions are there, you find some mathematical identities, which takes you to the journey to the highest or to the 4th level of the metric. And then 4 system together builds it. So what happens is, you take this whole 4D dynamic, 11D dynamic system information from nature, but when you integrate them, you do it at 4 level, quaternion level in the sensor system. Then what you do, you send it to the midbrain, then it goes to octonion level. So 4 level, 11D data, 4 level, 11D data, 8 level of integration, and then 11D data, 11 dimensional integration. So these are the 3 steps by which it happens. So quaternion, octonion, and dodecanion. So these are the 3 levels. So that is in figure 7.1. I know you have not understood it, but I will come back to this many times. Figure 7.1F, you have seen this figure when we were describing the time crystal in chapter 2. I have repeated it here. Why? Because this is very important. When you have a clock or you have a periodic clock-like system, whenever I say that biological rhythm or something, you understand, people understand that it is a circadian rhythm. No, circadian rhythm is only one part of it. There are many different kind of rhythms that are running through the system. Many different kind of clock-like oscillations are running through the system, and our brain model actually considers all possible clocks. Some of them we have tried to include 537 different classes of clocks we have tried to include in our brain model from many different kind of organs. But that is not enough. That is just the beginning. So that's why we have tried to remind you that don't forget the basics, that you have a phase sphere, and then a clock is moving, and then it is interacting with another clock, and a singularity point is created. That is represented with tensor, and then that is the very foundation that we created in chapter 2. Even though we have come to chapter 7, we should not forget about it. Actually, what you heard in chapter 1, that will actually get expanded as you move through the book. And chapter 7 actually gives you total clear-cut idea how the brain would be. Now we come to figure 7.2. As I told you that the first 6 figures of this chapter just are mere examples, that if you look at those structures, how do you find primes or prime number of cavities? 7.2a is about eye. You enter different part of eye, and then you will find that prime number of cavities are there, like 7 columns of eruptions, 5 different parts, 13 cavities in the eye. And then if you see the light sensing rod cell or cone cell, you will find 11 chain carbon 11 carbon chain molecule is over there. Then you come to B. B is about eye or cochlea, and then you see the pathways, and then also the signal transmission pathways. You find that prime numbers are there. Then you come to figure 7.2c. This is about nose, and you will find that 23 different types of receptors are there. 23 is a prime number, and then how the signals are integrated. Then you come to figure 7.2d, and then you will find touch, skin, and then you will find 7 different kind of sensors, 13 different kind of pathways are interacting with each other. And then you go to 7.2 to E, that is our tongue, and you will find that there is an integration of 7 different columns, and they change like this, and then single molecule goes there when we test some food, and then they change the conformation of the molecular conformation, and that's how you test different kind of things. And then 5 test regions are there, and then 3 different kind of centers are there in the brain where you do it. So it's a triangular pathways. So you see again the prime. So prime, not in the pathways, not in the number of cavities. And then when you construct the solid resonators, for an example, figure 7.2e, 7 columns of molecular spirals, which actually senses a single molecule for test. 7 are solid dielectric resonators. So there are dielectric resonators, but 7 dielectric resonators, but when they make a cavity, that cavity also resonates. So that's the beauty of the brain model that we are proposing. We have cavity resonator and dielectric resonator. Both are working simultaneously. Both of them, one of them actually senses the physical objects, and then or traps the energy, and then makes permanent changes in the system. Let's go to 7.3. Same thing, it will be repeated, as I said, that search for the quest for prime number of cavities, that has been repeated in the first 6 figures. So primes, we try to find 11 number of cavities. You see the pictures, figure 7.3a, and then 7.3b, we try to do that in hippocampus, and then 7.3c, we try to do that in hypothalamus. We try to do that same thing in thalamus. So basically all the component, you just go on. But one thing is very interesting. Figure 7.3b. To the right side, you will find that there is a 37 layers of spiral rings in the hippocampus, 37. And then each branch, each spiral branch, actually cable comes out, nerve fibers, and they go to different brain regions. And people may find 43 also, or 47, because 47 different Broadman's regions are there in the brain. Again, 47 prime. So 37 we detected. 6 of them are left, but I don't know. Maybe there may be 43 we missed some, but 37 we found maximum number of spirals that were there in the literatures reported, because all this searching or this prime numbers when we have assigned, we have gone through many literatures related to that particular component, and then we have 110 years of literatures are flooded with brain structures, and finding primes there is not a difficult thing to do. You can go, and then all these images we have redrawn it, but many researchers have already used this kind of prime numbers, and then they have not claimed prime numbers, but they present it in this way. So so we come to figure 7.4. In the 7.4, in the limbic system, for an example, the information is coming from the spinal cord. It goes to brainstem, the top part, and then when it spreads through to the upper brain through the antenna like fornix or cingulate gyrus, you feel like projectors, and there is a triangular pathway, and you can see now all the research papers, they talk about the upper part fold of the brain, and then many nature papers are also published. But I think that those are just to show up something. If you look at the internal geometry of the same cortex region, then you will find a triplet of triplet cavities. How? 7.4a I have shown. So what you do, you go to others' literature, because we are not brain researchers. We just collect data from others' work. Just go back, and if you have a basic idea of how to find cavity and then other kind of resonators, then you go there, and then you will find we have picked it up, this picture, this geometry, we have picked it up from Rita Carter's brain map. And then you can take other standard classic textbook brain when that kids are there. Then you will find the triplet of triplet cavities, 3 cavities, and then each cavities are also made of 3 things. And then that kind of pathways are there. So triplet of triplet cavities is not a new thing. And then you will find the total number of cavities actually total that is controlling the projection from the midbrain to the upper brain is actually 30 number of cavities are there. So so you can also see the projection that and left side prime in the central brain 7. So different branches. When with EEG you see the signal is coming out from the central brain to upper brain with fMRI, and then you can classify them. Then you can see that even in the fMRI also the prime pathways are selected. So after we present this, then you can go back and look at the data produced by others, and you will be shocked and surprised to see how prime number of pathways, prime number of cavities are there. So figure 7.4b, you look at the spinal cord branches: 2 hand, 2 legs, and 1 on top. So you have five-fold symmetry. And then in the spinal cord also there are 5 different sections. We have not classified it. Based on the vibration, others have classified it. And also you will find that Hindu monks, when they developed yoga, they say there are 5 different sections in the spinal cord, and they concentrated very much on the spinal cord control. So figure 7.4d, you can find that our cranial nerves that are coming out, and then they are also distributed in prime numbers. And in the cortical columns there are prime number of 7 number of layers, and then when the other layers are coming out, then you will see that 17 channels actually comes out. That is also a prime. And then you can come to nucleus, and other outside the nucleus there are different kind of planar symmetries, and you will find 3-fold, 5-fold different kind of symmetries by which extracellular materials or pericentricular membranes, those systems are there. And then basal ganglia, there are 19 different cavities, and then those are packed in 7 different prime number of cavities, while their group 19 is a prime, and then 7 is a prime. So in this way, basically we made a journey. And then figure 5, when we come, we find that figure 5 is all about neurons. So in the textbook, we have replicated it from the textbook, and then we have classified it from different textbook, different documentation or compilation we have collected, and then we have put them together just to tell you that 23 types of glial cells, 23 types of neuron cells, and 11 types of oligodendrocytes and interneuron connections, 11 classes of connections. Uh, Figure 7.5c is created by us, but believe us or trust us, we have sincerely followed the literatures, and we have found 11 classifications. If you find more classifications, you are very much welcome. What we are saying that 11 types of cavities, this geometric engineering, global geometric engineering or engineering symmetries, not intricate geometries of pathways, but global geometries are being followed. And then we come to figure 7.5d, and then if you go through the spirals, you can take prime number of gaps, and then you can go there. In all the animal kingdoms, even in the plants, you will find 13 protophyllum. 13 is a prime from microtubule. And then in proteins, you will find that protein cavities, the way they are doing it. We have searched 35,000 proteins in the PDB database, and then we try to find out how many cavities are there, and we found that not more than 23. It's beautiful. It was several months of work, and then student worked very hard to find how many cavities would be there that could explain all possible proteins, and we found only 23. So you can so cavity wise divisions. So later in some book, when we'll expand this book series, this single Nanobrain book into a Nanobrain series, then we will describe we'll describe the primes. And then finally, figure 7.5f is about DNA, RNA, and other structures. How many primes are there? But we have not described in details because so many literatures are available for the role of primes in DNA and RNA structures that we thought that we should not get into. We have just mentioned it couple of papers because they have described it very well and very thorough. The why primes we should be taking to understand the coding. So you understand that some regions we have contributed a little bit to find the cavities and identifying the cavities, but others have directly said there are some primes, there are some primes, there are primes, there are primes. So what we have done is integrated all the primes into a phase prime metric that you read in chapter 3. And now we come to figure 6. Figure 6 and figure 7 is about integration, about saying that one brain model is never sufficient. There are many brain models in the history of mankind in brain science, but one is not enough. Why? For an example, changing period of periods. In DNA, one small code is written, and that is repeated many times, 20 to 120 times. It's called microsatellites. And then that's how they encode information. And then so period of periods, and then period of periods, hierarchical periods is one way of doing it. So change the periodicity, and then you can change the memory. So when you do that, it happens at a very rapid and fast time scale, maybe femtosecond scale or time domain. So if you take the resonance frequencies of these systems, so 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 12 different layers we would go, and then it will go from very fast to slower cycles. So when this kind of clocks will be coupled in creating the complete time crystal map of the whole brain. There you will find that the faster clocks are made of this period of period principle, that philosophical principle or engineering principle that it uses. Spiral of filaments. So spiral of spiral means what? One spiral is this, another spiral is like this. So if you know Pancharatnam's geometric phase, this is how he came up with this idea of geometric phase. His invention was very different from Berry's invention, though Berry got the Nobel Prize for the similar discovery, but Pancharatnam had a very completely different kind of philosophies. So DNA microtubules, DNA complex, a twist of twists, and a number of filaments. They always do it. Number 3 is tensor and a vector of helices. So orientation of helices you saw in the tongue, and in many places you saw that twisting. For an example, in hippocampus you saw a spiral of spirals. in interesting. So at many different scales, you will find this 12 basic engineering principles of memory storage. So you can twist the geometric parameters very little, and you can store very important information, and you can retrieve. So 23 different cavities and of neurons, cavities of proteins, and orientation of helices to make cavities. So what you do is you take alpha helices, secondary structures of proteins, and you rearrange them, and then with a beta set you cover it and isolate a small part, as I explained in chapter 5, uh, because that was one of the greatest discovery of proteins that we believe would go in a very long run in protein engineering. Mm, uh, so that kind of isolation of protein energies or into different cavities. So that is number 3. So secondary structures, they together they isolate small pockets inside a single protein molecule. And then lattice memory, so microtubule, actin, beta spectrin framework. So proteins make ordered complexes in different kind of cells. This is secondary structures which are read by Storm Technique, and in Harvard University I went there in the lab. I saw that this lattices are there just beneath the membrane. And what do they do? They change geometry a little bit, square to a little bit parallelogram or something like that, and they can store a very different kind of information. So that kind of structures are always there. And chemical transmission cycle, for an example, neuron geometries, the branching is very different ways. This is very well studied. So number 5 is very well studied, and almost 98 to 99% of the scientists of the world believes that number 5 is the way, because because signal comes through one branch and then divides into two branch and multiple different branches, nerve spikes go. It's very easy to correlate it with the circuits that we have built separately. But I think that all the 12s are equally important, and they work together. So at a particular place, if you try to find consciousness or the intelligence, you will not be able to do so, because if it is in the temporal domain, then temporal domain means you have to create vibrations in that time domain and in many time domains, so that how it looks like physically doesn't matter, but when they vibrate, then a beautiful temporal architecture is created, artificial supramolecular structures. So it's a new kind of material which you cannot touch, which you cannot feel, but that is created. And then when that vibrates and some topological changes occur, topological restrictions, and then that topological restrictions, when they come, they also change following the pattern of restrictions of prime distributions. So these are the 4 layers of brain operation. And why the and okay, I will get back to consciousness a little later. And number 6 is leak density of cavity. So ion channel density, so leaking of cavities is very important aspect. So by changing the ion density channel, how many leaking points are there, you can do a lot of wonderful things. This is also very well studied in the last 100 years regarding neuron, especially after 1984, when ion channels were measured, single ion channel, by Sheckman and Neher, and after that people try to find out ion channel density and its role. So it is beautiful way of, suppose you have a cavity and you change the the number of holes then through which ions leak, and the potential is regulated. You can modulate time, and then you can do beautiful modulation of time using that one. So in the millisecond time domain, actually 2 different kind of memory systems are there. One is, of course, the geometry of branches, the way you do it, and other is density of ion channels. So density of ion channels is another way of beautifully regulating the time. But we also said in chapter 5 that apart from this 2, there are also this square architectures. That's the number 4, and then a microtubule bundle inside the neuron axon, and also there they can also change their geometry, the spiral arrangement, and then they can store some information. So number 8 is vortex or fractal memory. So what happens is the neuron geometry is there, and then when it projects different kind of branches, so depending on the geometries, it can create an electric field, mechanical field, or electromagnetic field, electromechanical field, many different kind of field, and then it can project like an antenna, a vortex. Vortex means a circular ring of field, not and the field has a system point and it is rotating like this. What happens? The vortex actually can go long distance, and if it is electromagnetic, it doesn't need any medium. If it is mechanical, of course, it needs medium, but it can go very long distance uninterrupted, and that is actually that actually helps in mutual interaction and information exchange in a lossless manner. So so assembly of cortical columns and a neural superhighway, we have found that assembly of cortical columns they arrange in such a way they can project many such vortices, and then they can come together and create architecture clocks. So each vortex could be like a singular clock, and then many of them can come together and build a clock architecture. And then number 9, 8 geometries from teardrop to ellipsoid, golden modes on linear chain, spinal cord. So spinal cord is the example where you can find it. So what you do is when you take a long chain and the spirals come out, then you take the number of primes and different kind of ratios of fundamental constants e pi phi, and this kind of constants are there while taking out the cables. You can find exactly same spinal cord and also in hippocampus. Hippocampus, there is a spiral chain from which it goes upward and then on in the higher brain, and then from there in the bottom brain. So what you see is by changing the ratio of the branching in terms of fundamental constants, actually you can regulate the memory in the number of branching, how many ways you group them. And then number 10 is phase of electromechanical signal. So electromechanical signal means you apply electric field and you see some mechanical motion. So e pi phi works over there. E square plus phi square equal to pi square, as I told earlier, that this actually governs everywhere in the biological system in the body. So it is another very major discovery that we made, that electrical resonances, mechanical resonances, and magnetic resonances are correlated. You will find it in the end part of chapter 6, also chapter 5, I think, chapter 5. So what happens is different functional domains of the brain, they are connected electromechanically. So it's just like you have a sphere, and then circular regions are there. They are changing pathways and trying to solve TEMS problem, TAMMES, TEMS problem, and then they are the projecting space. Okay, and then they actually change their relative position, and that is also a memory. And the relative area and connection and which location they would be, all this kind of things. And nonlinear density of primes, not editable. So hyperspace geometric memory is there. And then Dodecanian geometric constants, phase space duality. So 11 and 12 is very important. When you look at the structures, how it is being projected vertically upwards, and from sensors it is coming horizontally to there. So it's an orthogonal system, and then you will find that it's just like a big tensor. You have Dodecanian tensors in horizontal and vertical, and then this vertical symmetry allows this terms and this terms to multiply, and then allow the Dodecanian algebra to implement. So that is another kind of memory. So you can't see it, but when you take a vertical systems like this and horizontal systems like this, you will find that not here, but when you look at the tensor material, tensor space, and then you will find that there are some elements at different regions. That means due to interference or that other kind of effect, or phase scale higher level dynamics, you will find that other elements in different other terms. So the different layers which are vertically going from, say, spinal cord to top, and then skin to midbrain. So just like one another, something like that. So we will go to figures to 7.7, where we have studied 12 rhythms that we have found in the brain. So first kind of rhythm is magnetic rhythm in the alpha helices. So you apply electromagnetic field, and then you will find that electric field gets separated and magnetic field gets separated, and magnetic rings are produced and electric rings are produced. So magnetic vortices we could observe, and then quantum beating, spin and wave functions of electrons interfere. So basically, what we found that in that alpha helices also you will find that not just the spin and wave functions of electrons in the vortices. These vortices actually interfere with each other, and then they regulate the spin distribution on the secondary structures, not only in DNA and then alpha helices of single molecule. So what happens is how the quantum processor or quantum entanglement survives in room temperature. This happens because it is not the electron spin or electron spin state which is entangled. It is the vortex state that is entangled. So vortex state can entangle in room temperature. There is no problem. There are multiple reports of that. So vortex, if it is made of any kind of different fields, it doesn't matter by which field. But if it is rotating and if it is created from single source, you can split it two different vortices, and then you can show that they are quantum mechanically entangled. In room temperature, in open atmosphere and under massive noise, it doesn't matter. So density of states flux, geometric protein complexes. So when there is a geometric protein complex like microtubule and other kind of complexes are there, then many different kind of these kind of vortices self-assemble and create first time crystal architecture. So in microtubular protein complexes, you will find first existence of supergeometric time crystals that you can really measure in a classical size, and you can see it. So van der Waals rhythm induced dipolar loop. So continuum dipole model is there. So if there are two dipolar oscillations of two different kind of say pi orbital and then other kind of structures which follows 1 by r cube, okay, and that kind of interaction is there at many places in the brain, and then you will find some memory over there. So number 4. Number 5 is electromagnetic rhythm. So electromagnetic systems when run through a dielectric or magnetic resonators, and then they come back and there is a feed-forward loop. So electrical oscillations, ionic oscillations, nerve spikes, we all know about it, is number 6. Number 7 is quasi-particle rhythm. So whenever there is a crystal structures or crystal-like structures or ordered structures, there could be mechanical vibration you generate here, and then mechanical vibration propagates like a soliton, mechanical soliton, and it can also carry a little bit of charge, and then it can propagate lossless manner from one end to another. But of course, if there is no medium, then it disappears. The energy has to be converted, and energy is mostly converted in vortex. Easiest way for that to happen. And vortex is, vortex is the most feasible way by which these imaginary worlds and different kind of interacting mechanisms can transfer energy. For an example, you have magnetic vortices, but in the alpha helices you see it. But when inside the cavity, when it generates some cavity property, then those magnetic vortices can come together, can generate a situation so that when electromagnetic signal comes, then it can interact and it can modify and generate a vortex like electrical vortex. It can modify because pure magnetic loop forms or not, we don't know, but it modifies the electric vortex formation or electrostatic vortex formation or other vortices. So different kind of vortices can interact with each other and exchange energy and can transform with or without morphogenesis. So many rings are together, these vortices, they can change their geometry or convert a completely different mechanism made by vortices of different mechanism. It can transform from one kind of field to another kind of field and keep the topologically. So it's like topologically invariant. So so it's you can say that it is conformal. So conformal is essential because at different clock layers, when you are exchanging information, geometric shape remains intact. It has to remain intact. And why do we isolate? Because then only we can operate Dedekind algebra or many other kind of algebra, and lots of advantages are there. If you do flat brain model, that was existing there, just like a computer circuit, then it is different. But when you have a vertical journey, then of course there are problems, because you need imaginary layer interactions between different imaginary layers, and then vortex must, and then conformal feature transformation is also a must. So figure 7.8. So for figure 7.8, figure 7.9, figure 7.10, these three figures are actually um, uh, we explain the whole brain in an integrated fashion, like figure 7.8a. Left side of this big circle, you see a big circle. Left side is the sensors. So 8 layers of sensors, and then a sensor, how it looks like, it's a quaternion, but there are 13 different levels. And then the sensors information comes to the midbrain, and from midbrain it spreads to 47 broadbands region. And then those big circles are actually cortical column assembly. The same thing we have explained in figure 7.8b, that data integration is 4D of different higher level integration, but pure data is 12D, 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 12D. Always you, in the sensor itself you get higher level dynamics, because if you don't capture it, you cannot recreate it. Of course, phase prime metric allows you to recreate. Phase prime metric allows you to recreate uh, the dynamics, but you need to get pure form of information in totality. It cannot happen that it recreate information. Of course it creates information when it generates new kind of dynamics, but suppose I have not told you my name, how could you know my name? And but if I tell you all the information that I wanted to tell you, then what was going on in my mind, different interactions, you can think about it and recreate it. So you see 12D, 12D, 12D in figure 7.8b, and but 4D, 8D, 12D. So what happened is integrating and getting high level dynamics is first 4D at the sensor level, then at the midbrain level 8D, and then 12D. And then there are certain primes which are dominating in the sensor level, in the midbrain level, and the higher brain level. And then time also, operational time is different. Figure 7.8c. Now what happens is you need a little bit of knowledge of how brain structure is made. So if you are from background is from brain science, it's good. If it's not, doesn't matter. You can open a standard textbook, and you can find that geometrically we have gone through every single brain structure, and then we have seen that who communicates, sends signal to whom, and who is dependent on whom. That was a massive hard work. So it took 11 years for me to come to this level. I started in 2010, and then 2019 actually entire work got finished, because many research papers we had to read, and then we had to compile, edit, delete, and edit, and delete, and edit many times. Finally we reached geometric representation of every single component. But when you read it, you will find it, oh, it's very simple, I can do it. But initially it was very difficult. So basically, if there are multiple different components which are interacting with each other to do the major property, major expression of a particular organ, brain organ, then we put them into one geometric shape. And that is a simple physical principle that we have followed for all modeling. For an example, here midbrain is there, and then cranial nerves, spinal nerves. How do you classify them into different things? So you have seen the classification in different forms in the book, but what we are not creating a new kind of science. What we are doing is using the geometric physical language to rewrite everything that we already knew, so that we can apply phase prime metric. Phase prime metric is a new thing, and then new concept, new way of creating a spontaneously operating mathematical core structure which can regulate, self-regulate everything. But all this information are already known. For an example, figure 7.8c. Figure 7.9. Here what we have done is some more component: brainstem, limbic system, central nervous system, decision making time crystal. So you can, but how does tensor comes in? So suppose we are at the midbrain level, and and then what happens is the sensory information has come to the midbrain, and then I'm sitting in the midbrain, and I have an octonion, I have to fill it up. So there is a kind of emotion, and then proprioception. Two kind of properties are there which are not directly in the sensors. And then what we do is vision, sound, smell. Figure 7.9e. It's beautiful. So if you look at it, then sound and smell interacts, and then we get pain. We feel some kind of pain. So these are the kind of tensor mathematics. So how our complex senses might have been developing, and then F is a summary of that. That we have a crossover for every single sensory signal. So crossover means cytosymmetry. So cytosymmetry we do, and then city symmetry, C5 symmetry, C7 symmetry. We continuously try to apply those kind of things. And then who produces the octonian? Thalamus for visual, for smell amygdala. So if you know brain science, then it's very easy for you because you know the wiring. And if you don't, just search about smell and something where it is processed, and you will find the producer, and the cortex or midbrain, or where it is being, and which prime is dominating in this pathway. Then you will find that. Figure 7.7, figure 7.10 is, so we have different kind of operators. And then, so as I said, that there are two, the whole brain could be divided into one horizontal system and back system. And in the horizontal system there is a crossover, as you can see it here. And then there is a cyclic pathways at every at 3 layers, at every, even in the crossover and in the junction. And then so horizontally sensors, it comes through crossover, and then it goes and projected and back and forth between midbrain and then sensors. And then vertically between midbrain and then the upper brain. So the pharynx and then singular gyrus, all these antenna-like structures, they actually turn it in a vertical direction. And then there is a processing pathways, and what should be the parameters, how will you create the elements for the tensors, and how will you put it in the space-time topology prime metric to get the conscious state of a human brain. That prescription is actually here. And chi-like, reverse chi-like symbol that you see here is a mathematical operation that we defined in this chi-like operation and chapter 4. So chapter 4, we came up that all the Fespai matrices and the Dodecanian algebra, when we have circular mathematics, how to connect circles and do all this kind of processing. From those basic mathematical operations, we have defined this chi-like symbol, and that actually operates naturally. So it looks at the side of the circles or the side of the clocks, which one longer time, smaller times, symmetry, and other kind of things, and then it integrates. During integration, addition, subtraction, division, power, logarithm, continued fraction, all these properties or differential equation or integration, whatever is required, naturally selected, and that is performed. So it's a beautiful mathematical way of doing algebra. So even if you don't understand this particular chapter, doesn't matter. You just pass through, and later you can come back if you are really interested in mathematics. Figure 7.11 is about finding the elementary shape. Figure 7.11, and then water crystal is at the bottom in the protein structures, and then tubulin cylinder, C termini is kind of spiral, and then vortex assembly, and then vortex assembly is there. So we call it device H, namely inductor. So it's a new kind of fourth circuit element that we are proposing. Fourth circuit element means very simple. You store the charge, and then you apply electromagnetic field or any kind of field, and you generate vortices. If the vortice is magnetic, we prefer that it should be magnetic. Then it can pass through water. The body is 77% water. So vortex actually, magnetic vortex or magnetic nature, any particle of magnetic in nature actually passes through and least disturbed in the system. So you can pass electric signal, but electric signal is limited. That's why if my information is being processed with magnetic systems, if I want to process memory changing and other kind of work, we should use electrical or other kind of modes, so that my universal magnetic signal based information processing is never disrupted. So here we show actually elementary scale to higher scale. If we go, what are the components that we are getting and how we reach from tiny protein structure secondary, and you go to higher level and higher level of the device. So port circuit element we inductor that we will describe in chapter 8. So initially it has to have three concentric layers, water or protein or something like that, so that they oscillate, and then mm, a light comes or electromagnetic wave comes. It splits into two coherent states, and then these two coherent will interfere and then create the vortex. So then we can have those filamentary bundles inside a neuron and actin spectrin lattice, and then membrane and glial cells are interacting, are binding with them and creating another symmetry, and they would vibrate together, and then when energy comes, and then they will also split and create another kind of vortices. So one device is there, they integrate, they self-assemble and then form another device, and then they create another kind of vortex assemblies. This component again self-assembles and create another kind of assemblies. So each device, that inductor, self-assembles and forms H2. H2 self-assembles and forms H3, and H3 third level we go to superlattice structures, tract fibers, and then cortical column, tract fiber, and then superlattices. That is the unit device of decision making in the brain. So this figure is all about 7.11 is all about making the elementary device. Now figure 7.11d is the basic principle. So you need three layers, one top of other, and then it could be vortex shaped, not necessarily cylindrical or spiral or any kind of shapes, but they will have a longer dimension than diameter. Then if there is a pathway, then the system would be able to generate vortices, and then once it generates vortices or vortex self-assemblies, especially magnetic, then it's a port circuit element, and we can self-assemble them in many different ways as described in figure 7.11b. So we now come to 7.12 figure. So here we are showing many different kind of cavities and a beautiful generic principle of how you can simply look into the cavity. Figure 7.12c is a beautiful symmetry. So you take a basic composition of cavities, principle of basic composition cavity that we have outlined in the figure 7.12a at the bottom layer, at the third layer. And then this basic principle of teardrop to ellipsoid, using teardrop to ellipsoid shape in creating all kind of cavities, actually what happens is repeated everywhere in the brain, from protein to any structure you go, dimer or antenna or kind of hippocampus, wherever you go. So so it was a huge mathematical study that we carried out to simplify into one conformation. So teardrop to ellipsoid shape transition was reported earlier for protein also. It is not our first work, but we have expanded this particular principle to the entire brain model and all kind of cavities. We try to convert it, and one mathematical equation that explains the transformation from teardrop to ellipsoid is actually holding all kind of cavities. Now using that, when we make a different combination and then ask a skeleton function, it's available, we create an algorithm, we could create 30,000 different kind of neuron geometries just using this principle. And we regenerated it in the computer graphics. So that means if we know somehow to arrange cavities, for an example, if somebody gives me 2 into 3, 3 into 2 from the first prime metric, I know how to self-assemble the cavities, then I can create a neuron geometry. So you give me symmetry, and then I can convert it into cavity from this figure 7.12, and then we can do it. So figure 7.12d is a way to create actually cortical column assemblies and whole branches of neural network just using one algorithm. So it was a beautiful, beautiful discovery. Unfortunately, we didn't get time to write this manuscript, so I've just put it here because we have moved through in creating artificial brain. So much exciting that part is that partly I will describe in chapter 9. later in some other books that we just ignored. Sometimes we will get into this. Figure 7.13 is the real brain. Mm, Rajat Jain died, and his father donated his brain, and then we downloaded the brain structures, and then we simulated every single component. And we found that very basic principle that I said for reverse engineering the brain: dielectric resonator, cavity resonator, and there should be some water cavity. So actually three things: dielectric resonator, cavity resonator, and water cavity. Water cavity is very important. Many reasons, because water cavity gives you vortices very easily. We have checked that. So if water molecules are making ordered structures and I have a pump electric field or electromagnetic field or mechanical field, very quickly a circular ring-like field is generated, and that helps a lot. Hmm. That helps a lot in creating clock-like architecture representation of the whole brain. Figure figure 7.13, there are many parts of the brain components and how electric and magnetic fields are isolated, and then they process separately in the brain. That was very shocking to us. Figure 7.3, we have put it in the book only because we wanted to tell that this is a published paper. We only thing we wanted to tell is that the geometry of the brain structures and the biological structures is such that it wants to split electric and magnetic part of an electromagnetic wave whenever the noise is there, and then it tries to create a loop-like field-like rotation, and it adds an additional angular momentum to the electric or magnetic field, so automatically vortices are created. So if you have a polarized unidirectional signal and if we add angular momentum, naturally you will get a vortex. And that engineering is so much profound in many cavities and in the brain that you just can't believe. Figure 7.14. So this is the time crystal structures of the whole brain. So we found that 12 different brain components are there and 12 regions. So we took every single component, went on creating. So triplet of triplet when we are getting. So 1, 3, and then each 3 have 3, and then go on. So we try to find 12. 2 into 2 into 3, 2 into 3 into 2, 3 into 2 into 2. Is this kind of combination are there? So we found that 12 components are there for which these kind of things happen. Then we understand, oh, okay. So that means this time crystal figure 7.14 tells us that this structure can create 12 of 12. So what it can create? It can create 3 simultaneous phase prime matrices when it is vibrating. So 3 independent phase prime matrices, its symmetries it can operate. So that means when it's projecting to infinity, a topology is coming back and then running the same 3 phase prime matrices once again. So 12 components, all of them had 12 layers of clock architectures. So it's a composition of 12, and each one have 12 more time crystals. So what happens is that a triplet of H prime matrices self-operate. That's how consciousness is formed in the system. So brain model, if you look at figure 7.115, it's same like figure 7.14, 7.14, but we have just put the name of the clocks of what it is. Figure 7.16 is actually there's different kind of structures and different kind of cells and how different kind of primes they are dominating over there. We have not talked about 41, 43, and 47, which you see in the very higher brain, but equivalent geometric topology that they are using. So when you see the geometric topology is using and then that particular component, how it is. So basically, when you see 2, that means if an information comes, then information is you create a mirror replica, and then threefold symmetries based on the geometric shapes. You split it into three kind of geometries. So that is what topological means. And when topological processes are there, then it is very different than the normal information processing. So figure 7.16 have very interesting thing. You need only 2, 3, 5, 7, and 23. This number of cavities that you need. So we found it much later. Already other chapters were created, so we put it here that while looking at the brain, we found the brain has extreme love for C2 symmetry, C3 symmetry, C5 symmetry, C7 symmetry, C23 symmetry. All the neurons are C23, glial cells 23 types of geometric shapes, and repeating or branching classes are repeating. Why 23 or number of protein cavities? 23 types of protein cavities are there. So love for 23, love for 2, 3, 5, and 7, and it was quite dominant. And then there is a simple mathematics. You can paper piece of paper and you can do this mathematics in figure 7.16, that if you have those primes, actually you can put in a center and then you can generate other kind of primes also. Perhaps the way we have understood brain is one step, but it has much higher level topological processing, and then it will take hundreds of years to understand the brain the way we have started. It gives a lot of insight than what was there in the last 120 years of brain research, or 130 years or 150 years of brain research. But where we are able to see some much more hints for some much more kind of engineering dynamics inside the brain when we look at topologically. So figure 7.17, here again we are summarizing that 4 different kind of phase prime matrices. What are they? So actually information is entering, then local sensors are absorbing, then global sensors are taking, and then high level sensors are there. So ppm1, what is that? Actually one, and that is who, when, what, how. The 4 questions are there. So you remember in chapter 2 we say that there will be a big clock, and there will be host clock, guest clock, and guest clock, and guest clock, and then they will create the very unit of information, one element where the singularity is. So you ask 4 questions. Where is the singularity? Who is holding the singularity? How is holding the singularity, and something. So always we will search for confusion. You know that we will not search for fact. We'll search for confusion. So confusion, how do you see it? With ppm1, and then we send it to ppm2, and then we send it to ppm3, and then we send it to ppm4. ppm4 creates 3 different kind of tensors. Can you see that in figure 7.17? If you look at ppm4, you will see that 3 tensors are there, and then 3 boxes are there, and they are exchanging in triangular shape. So these are the 3 phase prime matrix. Three phase prime matrices. Actually, those are generated simultaneously. It can coexist in these 3 things. You cannot isolate it. So you start with one confusion and you reach the biggest confusion. that is the consciousness. So conscious state is actually a summary of ppm2, ppm3, ppm4. So many different kind of informations come, and then you get a reply of a bigger confusing systems, and an architecture of confusion where you get who, when, where, how, and then that reply is actually that you deliver to the world. So 7.18 is Garden of Gardens. As I told you, the biggest contribution of time crystal research, time crystal movement from 1970s to 2000 is Garden of Gardens, and I explained it extremely details in chapter 2, and then that again comes back over here. If you have little problem to understand this one, go back to chapter 2 and listen to my video, and then you can understand Garden of Gardens. What is Garden of Gardens? Garden of Gardens is if you have a clock and you have another clock and it is rotating, it looks like a meander flower. Now clocks could self-assemble in many different ways. Then what happens is you get meander flowers for all the possible dynamics of composition clocks. So many flowers together makes a garden. Now when you have a garden, you can take a small part of symmetries of clock structures, and then another garden, another clock structures, and then you can compose them, and then you create new kind of flower that never existed. That's a new thought that never existed, and you create it, and infinite ways of doing it, keeping the symmetry same. So topological symmetry, when somebody talks about topological symmetry, be very careful. When he talks about topological symmetry, there could be infinite ways of expressing it. Okay, so if there is a topological processor, every time you will get a completely new result. only a topological information converter, or time crystal analyzer that we have proposed for marketing and commercialization, the technology, only that can tell you, oh, it's the same like that kind of topology. It's coming from there. It's just a different expression. Just like Indian classical music, same raga, and you compose different songs. Different songs are created almost every day, and a musician, if you ask in front of you, he will sing, compose 10 different songs, which if you listen to that, it's completely different. But somewhere, somehow, you'll find some similarities are there, but you cannot tell what. Many people even cannot differentiate them. So so here what happens, there are one, two, three, four, five columns are there. So so different hypothalamus, cerebellum, hippocampus, blood vessel, cranial nerve, thalamic body, microtubule, thyroid. So these are the kind of a basic mean of our garden. Okay, so this garden, you can switch off some clocks, keep some clocks, and then you can create many flowers from each of them. From hypothalamus, you switch off some of the clocks, you generate some. So in this way, you can create many different kind of clock architectures. From there, you can combine connectome, ventricle, and neuron together in the third column, and that is fusion of gardens. And then when you mix the parts, and then new thoughts are created. One example, D1 is consciousness. You follow the letters, and then corresponding organs are written. But have we created this kind of consciousness, these loops by ourselves? No. That is also in the literature. That is the funny thing about this figure 7.18. All the things that you are saying is not our research, or we have not done brain research or anything. We have collected it from the literature. It was always there in the literature. We have just represented it in a different way. So column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, all structures were reported. But 4 different conscious behaviors are coming if you combine taking some symmetries of some organs here, some of the flowers, and then others, and then you will regenerate it. So finally, there is figure 19, 20, and 21. So here also you will find that we have taken 20 different conscious expressions of a human brain, and then these are the output of the garden of gardens. And then if you are very good in brain science or brain structures, or how these signals are produced, or other conscious expressions happen, then you can follow. There are some literatures, something like TL, CC, RF, PL. So you go to the figure caption, and you can find out what are those numbers refer to which component. And if you go to the literatures, you will find that actually that pathway actually exists. So all these figure 19, 7.19, 7.20, 7.21, you will find that all of those were published somewhere, but maybe in several thousands and thousands of papers, and then thousands of scientists worked. And then for 11 years, we have compiled them into geometric shapes and pathways, and compiled them together so that only 20 conscious expressions are enough and sufficient to represent a conscious machine. So basically, if I want to create, if I say that how this human brain model works, so brain creates cavities with prime number of cavities, and then it allows it to produce time crystals, basic hardware time crystals, 12 different components, and then they are the time crystal managers. They can form independent life. So 12 life forms can operate they by themselves like phase prime matrices. But when they come together and then create garden of gardens, at that point of time, what happens? Independent life forms contribute with some intelligent informations, and those informations come together, those flowers come together, and for garden of gardens. When garden of gardens come, then what happens is 3 phase prime matrices, project 3 infinite series of geometries to infinity, and from infinity the feedback comes. So geometrically, when the feedback comes, then these 20 time crystals are produced. Okay, figure 7.19, 7.20, 7.21. So these are the production of composition of garden of gardens. So projected and come back. So these are geometric infinite series were projected, and then they come back. So that's how the conscious machine works, and this is our human brain model. Thank you very much for listening to this. I know it has been a very tough journey, and believe us, for 11 years we work um, extremely hard, and it was very um, a painful journey because of the failures. When you look at it, it's a beautiful way of summarization. So there will be a full book on this particular model where we'll go in much more in details of it. But for to understand, just if someone wants to reverse engineer a human brain, how we'll do it, these 21 figures are essential and sufficient minimum requirement that you should know. Thank you very much. I will come back next day with the chapter 7, and oh, this is chapter 7, so I will come back with the chapter 8.